An hour before the registration deadline, I woke up with a start in my hotel bed in Escal. I realized that my boyfriend, Brannon Zimmer, and my adopted sister, Luna Hearn, were both gone. I quickly called them both to urge them to register right away. Instead, I was met with a burst of laughter on the other end. "We've flown back home already. We finished applying last night. Haven't you applied yet?" In the background, I could hear my parents grumbling. That's just how she is. She's so carefree and thoughtless that she doesn't even pay attention to her own affairs. Couldn't she be more sensible like Luna? It was a lively scene on the other end of the line, but I was shaking with panic. I had almost missed the deadline. After our test scores came out, the three of us had agreed to apply to the same university. Luna had been agonizing over her choice, while Brannon had looked at her with nothing but affection. "No rush. We'll help you take your time choosing." Then he casually told me, "Just go with whatever we pick. Have a blast in Escal these next few days." Just then, my phone vibrated. Brannon had sent me Southshire University's application code. Stop dawdling. The deadline's almost up. I stare at the application screen. My eyes stung with tears. My score had been about 120 points higher than theirs. It turned out that no one cared about the sacrifice I thought I was giving them. 1 second before the deadline, I clicked the apply button and chose the one farthest from home, Adderport University. With three of us, it would have been too crowded. So, I stepped aside on my own. When I rushed home from Escal, my family was sitting on the couch chatting. A large plate of cherries sat on the coffee table. Brannon picked out a few of the biggest ones and pressed them into Luna's hand. "These are sure to be sweet. Try them." Whenever I was home, such expensive fruit never once appeared on the fruit platter. At the sound of my arrival, all four of them turned their gazes toward me at once. Brannon sighed. His first words were a reproach. "You're the only one who loves to sleep in. You didn't even know we'd left. But then again, you were the one who insisted on a graduation trip back then." I clutched my luggage. My fingertips went numb. It was true that I was the one who had insisted on a graduation trip. But the destination I chose was Kailua. When we arrived at the airport, I finally realized Brannon had bought 3 tickets to Escal. His reason was that Luna wanted to go to Escal to see the Northern Lights. To make sure she got to see the Northern Lights, I stood in line for 8 hours in the biting cold. But the moment Luna said, "I'm tired," they turned around and headed back. Luna stood up and walked toward me. "Megalina, it's all my fault for sleeping in. We were in such a rush to leave that we forgot about you. I'm sorry." Then, she shot Brannon a scathing look. "Hurry up. You should apologize too." Brannon, who had never been one to back down to anyone, spoke sweetly and affectionately. I'm sorry. I was wrong, my little queen." But his gaze never left Luna. Mom and Dad also chimed in with a laugh. "Brannon was with you every step of the way through the college application process. Don't you dare bully him once you get to college." "I'm used to it, Mrs. Hearn." It seemed like Brannon had only just remembered that I was applying to college. As for Megalina Hearn, her score is definitely a bit lower than Luna's, but if she chooses Southshire University, she'll be in the same ballpark. At most, her major might be a little less prestigious. They all assumed I was not as good as Luna, but I had performed way above expectations on the SATs, scoring much higher than either of them. Back then, I had sent him a screenshot of my score and asked him to help me figure out which major at Adderport University I could apply for. He still had not replied to me. Yet, he had put together a 36-page presentation for Luna, listing every university she stood a chance of getting into. Luna sweetly hooked her arm through mine. She looked completely innocent. The three of us should go to Southshire University together, so we can look out for each other. Plus, the climate there is warm year-round. We'd be able to wear little sundresses every day. Brannon's face was full of doting affection for her, but I was allergic to UV rays. In hot, humid weather, my skin would break out in eczema. I simply could not stay in places that were too hot. No one remembered any of this. They only remembered how pretty Luna looked in dresses. I sat on the couch and reached out to a senior at Adderport University Forum. Brannon and Luna were huddled together as they scrolled through Southshire University's forum while discussing their upcoming university life with my parents. After a while, their laughter gradually died down. Brannon looked up and casually asked me, "You applied to Southshire University, right? Did you score high enough?" "Of course." I set my phone face down on the coffee table. "I did." After dinner, Mom and Dad brought out 2 sets of formal dresses they had prepared for Luna and me. "Your dad and I spent ages picking these out. You can wear them to prom, too. Go try them on." Luna naturally took the paper bag with the designer logo and kissed Mom on the cheek. "Thanks, Mom." I took the remaining cheap plastic bag and said calmly, "Thanks, Mom." 5 minutes later, Luna and I walked out wearing our dresses. Everyone's eyes were drawn to Luna. Brannon's eyes lit up. His ears instantly turned bright red. Luna, you look so beautiful in that. Luna could not suppress the smile on her lips, but she softly downplayed it. Mom and Dad, you've spent way too much. Actually, I could just wear something from a street stall like Meglina. It's just as good, right? The atmosphere in the living room suddenly grew silent. I was wearing that ill-fitting dress. The poor quality fabric felt prickly against my skin. It made me feel uncomfortable all over. Mom uneasily cleared her throat. Even street stall clothes are pretty expensive. It's $80. Since you'll only be wearing it for a little while, there's no need to waste money. But I could see clearly that the price tag on Luna's gown read over $3,000. As always, Brannon stepped in to smooth things over. Luna is the younger sister. You should let her have it. You look pretty good in this outfit, too. Mom and Dad chimed in. Yeah, wait until Luna's done wearing it before you put it on. That way, it won't go to waste. Ever since I was little, all the clothes I have worn have been Luna's hand-me-downs. They would brush it off by saying things like, "You look good in anything." But in reality, those ill-fitting second-hand clothes were so tight they made it hard to breathe. Seeing Luna in that princess dress, Mom and Dad could not help but gush over her. Luna has such fair skin and a lively, cheerful personality. This dress suits her perfectly. At that moment, the dress I was wearing felt like nothing more than a rag. Luna chuckled. Mom and Dad, hurry up and compliment Meglina. Otherwise, she'll get jealous. Dad was silent for a long time. Then he said with a hint of awkwardness flashing in his eyes, Meglina is quite responsible. Being responsible was my only virtue. That evening, just before bedtime, Brannon got ready to go home. He did not forget to turn back to me with a reminder. Tomorrow's the graduation ceremony. Go make us some packed lunches to take with us. Luna can't handle eating outside food. After saying that, he turned and walked away without looking back. He habitually treated me like Luna's nanny. I was clearly just as much a young girl in the bloom of youth as Luna was. Her fingers were so slender and soft. Yet there I was, stuck in the kitchen cooking and washing dishes. My fingers were rough as sandpaper. Even so, all they ever offered were half-hearted compliments. You're so responsible. I went straight back to my room and started packing. The winters at Adderport University were colder than ones at Southshire University. I tossed the thin, second-hand clothes out of my suitcase and packed a few extra thicker layers instead. I did not want to come back to this home ever again. At the graduation ceremony the next day, I took to the stage to give a speech as valedictorian. My homeroom teacher, Miss Sutton, looked very pleased. Her face was full of tender kindness. You performed exceptionally well on the SATs. It's a testament to all your hard work. Go on, share your experience with the younger students. I nodded to her. Then, I stepped up to the podium in the auditorium. It was not until I mentioned my parents' support that I realized their eyes were not even on me. Instead, they were listening to Luna's awkward spoken foreign language practice and showering her with praise. That's great. When we travel abroad in the future, we can count on Luna. But my foreign language grades had always been at the top of the class. Yet, they had never once praised me. Just as I was about to continue, my phone on the podium vibrated. Brannon sent me a message. The homeroom teacher let you give the speech just because you were class president for 3 years. You don't need to drone on for this long. Hurry up and wrap it up. Luna's getting a little tired. Instantly, all my words got stuck in my throat. My vision blurred with tears. The tip of my nose stung with a tingling sensation. I set down the microphone, gave a hasty bow, and fled the scene. When it came time to take the graduation photos, I made sure to save the spots next to me for my parents and Brannon. The next second, a figure shoved me to the edge of the crowd. Brannon pulled Luna over to the center spot. Luna absolutely loves taking photos. She looks best in the middle. When the photo came back, half of my body was cut out of the frame. Our homeroom teacher looked at me with a touch of sympathy. Would you like me to ask your family to take another one? I clutched the fabric on my pants and shook my head with a wry smile. Thanks, teacher, but there's no need for that. The next day, everyone got ready to attend the graduation banquet. Just before we left, Mom pulled me and Luna aside. This card is for your living expenses. There's some money preloaded on it. Then she made a point of telling me, spend it sparingly. As I watched Mom's hunched back as she walked away, a warm feeling welled up inside me. Just as I was about to get into the car, Luna opened her mobile bank app. Wow, a grand total of $100,000. Meglina, hurry up and check how much you have. Mom specifically told you to spend it sparingly. It's definitely way more than mine, right? I hesitated before tapping to check my balance. When I saw the amount, I froze. It was a total of $3,000. It was not even a tenth of what Luna had. Looking at that pitifully small amount of living expenses, I tapped on another card. It was supposed to contain the $30,000 for my tuition that I had saved from part-time jobs during winter and summer breaks. But no matter how many times I refreshed the screen, the balance remained at zero. Just then, Brannon came back to pick up his things. I grabbed him by the arm, my eyes red and teary. "Where's the money in my account? You're the only one besides me who knows the password." Brannon paused for a moment, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Luna loves to dress up, and your parents have always spoiled her. So I used that money to buy her a luxury handbag. You're different. You're frugal and love to pick up hand-me-downs. Since we go to the same school, you can still pick up hand-me-downs in the future. You won't need any money." I suddenly burst out laughing. I laughed like a madwoman. He knew full well how much effort I had put into saving that money. He also knew how much I wanted to live independently and move out of this house. But he went and ruthlessly trampled on my last shred of hope afoot. Just as prom was about to begin, everyone realized I had not gotten in the car.
My mom called me.
"You're holding us back again. Hurry up and take a cab over here." I did not say a word. Instead, I hailed a cab and headed to the celebration. As I pushed open the door to the banquet hall, my head buzzed in shock. My diary entries were playing on a loop on the big screen in the banquet hall. Today, Brannon gave the last bowl of soup to Luna, even though I'm clearly his girlfriend. Ever since Luna came to live with us when she was 8, Mom and Dad don't seem to love me as much anymore. My scalp prickled, and I rushed over to unplug the projector. "That's my diary." Luna's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. She bit her lip. I thought it was a speech my sister had written specifically for the prom. So, I played it to buy you some time and keep the guests calm. Before I could say a word, my parents glared at me warily. "It's just a few pages of a diary. Is it really worth yelling at your little sister over?" Then they glanced at the big screen. "No wonder your SAT scores were so poor. It turns out you've been wasting all your energy on being petty. Since when did you become so spoiled? If it weren't for those two going out of their way to accommodate you, you'd be attending college all by yourself in some remote area. I'd love to see if you'd be crying then." The guests at the event began to whisper among themselves. Such a young high school girl was writing so much about love and romance. She really wasn't focusing on her studies. When Brannon heard that, his face instantly turned red from embarrassment. "Did you skip on your studies just to write such sappy stuff?" I saw it clearly. His face was filled with embarrassment. It was as if he felt embarrassed to be loved by a girl he was not proud of. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat and looked across each of them. "You're the ones who read my diary without permission. It's not my fault." Luna wept as tears streamed down her face. She grabbed my hand and slapped herself with it. "Meglina, I know it's my fault. Don't blame Mom, Dad, or Brannon. They don't know anything." The next second, a strong force shoved me aside. Mom and Dad both stepped in front of her to shield her. Brannon's gaze toward me was filled with disappointment. "Do you have to make a fool of yourself in front of strangers? Get out first."
Mom and Dad chimed in.
"That's right. Go home right away and calm down. Think about how you're going to apologize to your sister. How could I have such an irresponsible daughter like you?" I did not argue any longer. I took one last look at them. Then, I grabbed my diary and ran out of the banquet hall. Back home, I listed all the unused items I could not take with me on a secondhand marketplace. As for the things I could bring, a small 12-inch suitcase was enough to hold them all. On my way to the airport, a message from Brannon popped up on my phone. "When your parents have both calmed down, hurry over and grab a bite. No one's going to cook a special meal for you tonight. Luna plans to head to the area near Southshire University a few days early to hang out. Come back soon so we can discuss when to leave. Don't go off on your own again." Right up until the very second before the plane took off, I typed out a reply. "I'm not going to Southshire University." After a moment's thought, I added, "Brannon, let's break up." I hit send, then blocked all 4 of their contact numbers. After prom ended, the guests gradually began to leave. Brannon stared at the unanswered message on his phone. He felt inexplicably restless. Miss Sutton called to congratulate. When Mom answered, her voice rose an octave in shock.
"What?"
"Meglina is going to Adderport University." Just then, Brannon's phone vibrated and 2 messages popped up. When he read the messages, all the color drained from his face. The air inside the hotel banquet hall, once thick with the clinking of glasses and high-pitched laughter, curdled into a suffocating silence. Miss Sutton's voice echoed clearly through the speakerphone of Mrs. Hearn's cell.
"Phone."
"Mrs. Hearn, are you still there?" I was calling to ask if Meglina has already boarded her flight to the north. Adderport University's admissions office called me personally this morning because of her phenomenal SAT score, 670, nearly a perfect curve. They've awarded her the Presidential Full-Ride Scholarship, complete with a private research stipend. Mrs. Hearn's hand trembled so violently that the phone nearly slipped from her manicured fingers. What did you say? 670? But Brannon said her score was barely enough for Southshire. Southshire. Ms. Sutton's voice spiked with indignation. Why on earth would Meglina go to Southshire? Her score was 120 points higher than Luna's. She was the city's top scorer in the science stream. She could have gone anywhere in the country, but she insisted on Adderport because of their world-class atmospheric research lab. Didn't she tell you? Every head in the room snapped toward Brannon. Brannon stood frozen, the color draining from his face until he looked as pale as chalk. His throat moved, but no sound came out. His mind reeled back to the screenshot Meglina had sent him weeks ago, the one he had dismissed without a second glance, swiping it away so he could focus on rendering a 36-page slide deck for Luna. She wasn't lying. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She didn't score lower. She scored higher than all of us. Brannon. Mr. Hearn's voice was low, laced with a sudden, ugly edge. What is the meaning of this? You told us Meglina was slacking off. You said she barely scraped by. I thought. Brannon stammered, his pulse hammering in his ears. He pulled out his phone with frantic, clumsy thumbs, tapping on Meglina's chat box. The screen flashed cold and uncompromising. I'm not going to Southshire University. Brannon, let's break up. He pressed the call button. A harsh, mechanical beep echoed immediately. The subscriber you are trying to reach has blocked your number. He tried calling her on social media. Blocked. He checked her location sharing status. Disconnected. She blocked me, Brannon whispered, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. She blocked you? Luna stepped forward, her innocent, doll-like eyes brimming with sudden agitation. Why would Meglina do that? Is she throwing a tantrum just because we played her diary? But I did it for her own good. She's being so selfish, leaving without saying goodbye. Shut up, Luna. Brannon snapped unexpectedly. Luna gasped, taking a step back as if struck. Never in her life had Brannon raised his voice at her. Brannon, how dare you speak to Luna like that? Mrs. Hearn scolded, though her own voice lacked its usual conviction. Her mind was spinning. The top scorer in the city was her daughter, her biological daughter, and yet, at the graduation banquet meant to celebrate academic success, they had publicly humiliated her as a lazy, airhead girl obsessed with romance. The surrounding guests, fellow parents and teachers who had stayed behind, began whispering in hushed, cutting tones. Did you hear that? Meglina got a full scholarship to Adderport. And her own parents didn't even know? They spent the whole night praising the adopted daughter who got a mediocre score, while treating the valedictorian like a servant. Look at the clothes Meglina was wearing, that cheap synthetic dress. And the other girl was wearing thousands of dollars in designer silk. The hushed commentary cut through the room like invisible blades. Mr. Hearn's face flushed a dark, mottled red. He grabbed his coat, thoroughly humiliated. We're leaving. Now. As they hurried out of the hall, Brannon stood staring at his phone screen. The empty chat window looked like a black hole, swallowing the quiet, constant presence he had taken for granted for 3 years. He told himself she was just being dramatic. Meglina had always been obedient. She had loved him since they were 15. She would cool down in a few days, realize how cold Adderport was, and come crying back to him. She had to. The plane touched down at Adderport International Airport late in the evening. As Meglina stepped out of the terminal, a crisp, cool breeze swept across her face. The air here was dry, fresh, and free from the sweltering, sticky humidity of her hometown. For the first time in years, her skin didn't itch. Her breathing felt deep and unburdened. She pulled her small 12-inch suitcase behind her, walking into the sleek arrival hall. Waiting near the gate was a tall woman holding a sign with her name on it. Meglina Hearn, the woman asked, offering a warm, professional smile. I'm Professor Vance from the Materials Chemistry Department at Adderport. Ms. Sutton told me you were taking an earlier flight. Professor Vance, Meglina bowed respectfully, surprised that a senior faculty member had come to greet her personally. We don't usually do this for freshmen, Professor Vance said, taking in the girl's slight frame, her worn canvas shoes, and the singular, undersized suitcase. But a student who scores near perfect on the natural sciences SAT and specifically requests our Northern Climate Lab is a rarity. Welcome to Adderport. They got into a university sedan. As the city lights flickered past the window, clean, orderly, framed by distant, majestic mountains, Professor Vance handed Magdalena a thick, navy blue folder. This is your official admission package. Aside from full tuition coverage, the university has allocated a $15,000 annual living stipend, dispersed quarterly. The first installment of $3,750 has already been wired to your student account. Magdalena opened the folder. Seeing her name printed cleanly alongside the official seal of Adderport University, a knot in her chest finally dissolved. $3,000, that was all her mother had tossed her like a piece of charity, while giving Luna $100,000. But here, based entirely on her own intellect and effort, she was given honor, freedom, and real financial security. Thank you, Professor, Magdalena said, her voice steady and clear. I won't
disappoint you.
Her dormitory was a private, single room reserved for top scholars, complete with a large oak desk, an ergonomic chair, and a bright window overlooking the
Central Library.
Magdalena spent her first night cleaning the room. She unpacked her few belongings, 3 thick sweaters, 2 pairs of sturdy pants, her notebooks, and a framed photograph of herself taken at a science competition 3 years ago, the only photo where she was alone, free from the shadows of Brannon and Luna. Before turning off the lights, she pulled out a new, sleek notebook she had bought at the airport gift shop. On the first page, she wrote, August 14th, 2026. My life begins today. 2 weeks passed in a flash. At Southshire University, the orientation week was in full swing. The southern heat was brutal, the humidity hovering near 90% daily. In an apartment rented near the campus, funded by the Hearns, Brannon sat on the edge of a leather sofa, wiping sweat from his forehead. The floor was littered with crumpled shopping bags, half-empty takeout boxes, and unfolded designer clothes. Brannon, where is my morning matcha latte? Luna's shrill voice rang out from the bedroom. She stepped out, wearing a silk sundress, her face pinched in frustration. And why haven't you folded my laundry yet? You know my clothes need to be steam-ironed. Brannon rubbed his temples, feeling a sudden, sharp throbbing behind his eyes. Luna, I had to turn in our registration forms this morning. I haven't even had time to unbox my own luggage. Well, Magdalena used to do all of this before we even woke up.
Luna poted.
Stomping her foot. When we went on trips, she always had the fruit washed, the ice water ready, and the clothes ironed. Why are you so slow? Brannon looked at Luna, feeling a strange, jarring sensation in his chest. In the past, Luna's pouting had seemed adorable, a delicate trait that made him feel protective. But now, amidst the stifling heat and messy apartment, it felt demanding and exhausting. During their high school years, whenever the three of them spent time together, Magdalena was always quietly working in the background. She kept the tea hot, remembered everyone's schedule, cleaned the mess, and never uttered a single complaint. Brannon had assumed that was just how Magdalena was: carefree, domestic, and naturally inclined to serve. He had never realized that her domestic efficiency was not a personality trait, but an act of love, an act he had systematically trampled underfoot. Magdalena isn't here, Luna, Brannon said, his voice flat. And I'm not your servant. Luna froze, her eyes widening in shock. What did you say? Brannon, are you yelling at me? I'm telling my parents. She grabbed her phone and immediately called Mrs. Hearn, sobbing dramatically into the receiver about how Brannon was being mean to her and how miserable she was in Southshire. Brannon didn't stay to listen. He grabbed his keys and walked out into the scorching heat. He pulled up his phone and opened his secondary social media account, one he had created years ago. He searched for Adderport University's official student forum. It didn't take long to find her. On the front page of the university's official news feed, a newly posted article was pinned to the top. Freshman Spotlight. Magdalena Hearn joins National Atmospheric Chemistry Defense Project. There was a photo attached. Magdalena was wearing a tailored white lab coat, her dark hair neatly tied back in a professional low bun. She was standing beside Professor Vance and several senior graduate students holding a clipboard. Her face was clean, serene, and radiant, completely devoid of the exhausted, anxious shadow that had hung over Her in Escal and at home. She looked stunning. Not like the girl wearing an $80 rag at the graduation party, but like an elite, rising star in her field. Under the photo, the comments were flooded with praise. Whoa, who's the new girl in Vance's lap? She's gorgeous. She's the city top scorer from the South. Got a perfect score on the chemistry
section.
Elegance and brains. Absolute queen. Brannon's thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. He felt a sudden, suffocating tightness in his chest. The girl in the photo felt like a complete stranger, someone so far above him, that he couldn't even reach out and touch the hem of her coat. Back in their hometown, the Hearn household was spiraling into chaos. Without Meglina to maintain the house, the spacious villa felt cold and disorderly. But worse than the messy rooms was the sudden strain on their
finance.
Mr. Hearn sat at the dining table, staring at the bank statements spread out. Before him, his face was dark. Where did the $30,000 go? He demanded, slamming his hand on the wood. The money from the company's petty cash account that was routed through Meglina's savings account for tax filing. Where is it? Mrs. Hearn blinked in confusion. What, $30,000? Meglina's account? Didn't she take it with her?
No.
Mr. Hearn roared. The bank records show the entire $30,000 was transferred out 3 weeks ago, right before the graduation trip.
It was
transferred directly to a high-end luxury boutique in the city center. Just then, the front door opened and Brannon walked in, having taken a sudden weekend flight back home under the pretext of retrieving some forgotten documents, but secretly desperate to ask Mr. Hearn for help contacting Meglina. Hearing the commotion, Brannon froze in the entryway. Mr. Hearn turned his fiery gaze toward Brannon. Brannon, you managed Meglina's secondary account setup when she did her part-time high school tutoring.
Do you
know about this transfer? Brannon's heart dropped into his stomach. The memory came rushing back with terrifying clarity. Luna loves to dress up, and your parents have always spoiled her. So I used that money to buy her a luxury handbag. He had said those words so casually, so arrogantly because he was convinced Meglina would never dare challenge him. He had assumed the money was just extra cash her parents gave her, or that she wouldn't care because she loved hand-me-downs anyway. He hadn't realized that $30,000 was Meglina's entire savings, the blood, sweat, and tears she had earned from years of top-tier tutoring and scientific contest awards, which her father had temporarily held in her name.
I.
Brannon's voice cracked. Did you take it? Mr. Hearn stood up, towering over the young man. Answer. Me. I used it to buy Luna the limited edition Hermes bag for her graduation
gift.
Brannon squeaked out, his cheeks burning with utter humiliation.
I thought
Meglina wouldn't mind. Thwack. Mr. Hearn's heavy hand struck Brannon across the face, sending the boy stumbling back into the shoe cabinet. You idiot, Mr. Hearn yelled, his breathing heavy. That wasn't play money. That was corporate capital reserve. And you stole it to buy a handbag for Luna? Mrs. Hearn stood by, horrified, but quickly rushed to defend the choice. Honey, don't hit him. It was for Luna, anyway. Luna deserves nice things. Luna deserves nice things? Mr. Hearn laughed bitterly, his eyes wide with stress. Do you know what people in business are saying about me behind my back? They're laughing at me. They say I drove away a top-tier scholar daughter for an adopted, spoiled brat who spent 30 grand on a purse before even setting foot on a college campus. He grabbed his car keys and stomped toward the door. I'm going to Adderport. I'm bringing Meglina back. Adderport University, late autumn. The golden ginkgo leaves lined the stone pathways of the campus. The air was brisk, requiring a sleek, tailored wool coat, which Meglina now wore. Using her research stipend and the prize money from winning the Northeastern Regional Chemistry Innovation Competition, Meglina had completely revamped her wardrobe. She wore high-quality, comfortable fabrics in soft cream, navy, and earth tones. Her skin, unbothered by UV exposure in the cool northern autumn, was flawless and pale as porcelain. Meglina, here are the core synthesis results for Module B, said Julian A. handsome third-year master's student, handing her a tablet as they walked out of the laboratory building. Professor Vance said if these metrics hold up, your name will be listed as co-first author on the Nature Materials submission. Meglina smiled, her eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. Thanks, Julian.
Let's
rerun the thermal stability test once more just to be absolute certain. You're a perfectionist, Julian chuckled, looking at her with undisguised admiration. By the way, A few of us are going to the coffee house near the library. Join us. Sure, Meglina agreed softly. As they approached the glass door of the campus coffee shop, a ragged, familiar figure stepped out from behind a maple tree near the entrance. Meglina stopped in her tracks. Standing a few feet away was Brannon. He looked nothing like the polished, arrogant young man who used to boss her around in high school. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair unkempt, and his jacket wrinkled. He had traveled over 1,000 miles from the sweltering south to this chilly northern town, wearing only a thin windbreaker, shivering visibly in the breeze. Julian stepped slightly in front of Meglina, sensing the tension. Meglina, do you know him? Meglina looked at Brannon. Her eyes were as calm and still as a frozen lake. No anger, no grief, no hatred. Just absolute, piercing indifference. He's an old acquaintance, Meglina said quietly. Then she turned to Julian.
Go
ahead and order a latte for me. I'll be in after 2 minutes. Julian nodded tentatively and went inside, keeping an eye through the window. Brannon stepped closer, his voice trembling as he took in her appearance.
She
looked so elegant, so independent, so entirely complete without him. Meglina, I finally found you, Brannon choked out, reaching his hand out as if to touch her sleeve, but pulled back when she took a deliberate step
backward.
Why did you block me? Why didn't you answer my calls?
Do you know how
hard it was for me to find out which department you were in? Brannon, Meglina said, her tone smooth and businesslike. You have 2 minutes. Say what you came to say. Meglina, I was wrong. Brannon's emotional dam broke. He took a ragged breath, tears brimming in his eyes. I shouldn't have taken your money. I shouldn't have forced you to go to Escal. I shouldn't have played your diary at the banquet.
I
was blind, Meglina. These past 2 months without you, it's been hell. Luna is constantly throwing tantrums. Your parents are fighting every day, and I can't stop thinking about you. He looked at her with desperate, pleading eyes. Come back to us. Or transfer to Southshire. I'll help you handle the transfer paperwork. We can start over.
I'll
treat you better than anyone else, I swear. Meglina listened quietly until he finished. Then, a small, amused smile touched the corners of her lips. Brannon, do you really think I left because I was throwing a tantrum? She asked softly. Brannon blinked, confused. Weren't you? I left because I finally realized how worthless you all were, Meglina said, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the autumn wind like glass. I spent 3 years dimming my light so that you and Luna could feel superior. I wore rags so Luna could wear gowns. I hid my academic scores so you wouldn't feel insecure. And in return, you stole my hard-earned savings and humiliated me in public. She stepped closer to him, her cold gaze locking onto his trembling eyes. Transfer to Southshire? Leave Adderport's top-tier lab, my full scholarship, and my bright future, just to go back to being Luna's unpaid maid and your obedient little puppy? She let out a short, quiet laugh. Brannon, are you out of your mind? Brannon felt as though he had been struck by lightning. The words hit him with brutal, surgical precision, stripping away every bit of self-delusion he had clung to for 2 months.
No.
Meglina, that's not true. You loved me, he cried out, trying to grab her
hand.
You wrote about me in your diary. You said I was your light. That was before I opened my eyes, Meglina replied coldly, stepping back out of his reach. Now, regarding the $30,000 you stole from my account. She pulled out a crisp, white envelope from her coat pocket and handed it to him. This is a formal letter from my legal counsel. You have 7 business days to return the full $30,000 plus interest to my account.
If you
fail to do so, my lawyer will file a formal complaint with the district court and notify Southshire University's disciplinary board regarding grand theft and financial fraud. Brannon stared at the legal document in his hand, his head spinning. Legal counsel? You're suing me? I'm reclaiming what is mine, Meglina said smoothly. And as for the unauthorized broadcast of my private diary at the banquet hall, my lawyer is preparing a civil lawsuit against you and Luna for defamation and violation of privacy rights. Meglina, we're family. We were lovers. Brannon screamed, his voice cracking with panic. How can you be so heartless? Heartless. Meglina tilted her head, her expression chillingly placid. You haven't seen Heartless yet, Brannon. Now get off my campus before I have security escort you out. Without waiting for another word, she turned around, opened the door to the warm, brightly lit coffee shop and walked inside. Through the window, Brannon watched as Julian handed her a steaming cup of
Coffee.
Magdalena smiled, took a sip, and engaged in a lively, intelligent conversation with her peers, never looking back at the window, even once. Brannon stood outside in the freezing wind, holding the legal letter. A sudden, overpowering wave of regret washed over him, crushing his lungs. He had traded a diamond for a piece of broken glass, and now the diamond was shining brilliantly in the northern sky, entirely out of his reach, while he was left dragging broken glass through the mud. The legal notice hit the Hearn and Zimmer families like an artillery shell. When Brannon returned to Southshire, his father, a mid-level municipal official, was waiting for him in his dorm room. Without a word, Mr. Zimmer slapped Brannon so hard he knocked him onto his desk. "You brainless fool," Mr. Zimmer shouted, his face purple with rage. "The court summons arrived at our house this morning. Grand theft. If this goes on your permanent record, you'll be expelled from Southshire and I'll lose my public office." "Dad, I didn't know she would actually sue." Brannon wept, holding his bruised
cheek.
"Where is the $30,000? Mr. Zimmer demanded. Luna bought a bag with it." An hour later, Mr. Zimmer dragged Brannon directly to the Hearn residence in Southshire. The confrontation was brutal. Mr. Zimmer demanded that the Hearns pay back the $30,000 immediately to settle the lawsuit. "Why should we pay?" Mrs. Hearn argued, defensively clutching Luna, who was crying dramatically. "Magdalena is my daughter. What daughter sues her own boyfriend and family over a little bit of money?" "She isn't just suing Brannon, Mrs. Hearn." Mr. Zimmer threw a copy of the legal complaint onto the table. "She is suing Luna as well for publicly disseminating her private journals. The lawyers at Adderport are representing her pro bono. Because the university considers her a star student, they are pushing for maximum penalties." Mr. Hearn sat on the sofa, looking 10 years older. His business had already been struggling due to bad investments, and news of the family scandal had leaked into his business circle. Several long-term partners had canceled contracts, citing his appalling family ethics and poor character. "Give her the bag," Mr. Hearn said softly, his voice dead and dry. "What?"
Luna's ticket. No.
"That's my limited edition Hermes. My friends at school all saw me wearing it. If I sell it, I'll be ruined." I said, "Give her the bag or sell it." Mr. Hearn suddenly roared, slamming his coffee cup against the wall, shattering it into 100 pieces. "You useless, spoiled leech. You scored barely enough to get into a second-rate program. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and you drove away the only child in this house who actually had a brain." Luna squealed in terror, hiding behind Mrs. Hearn. Mrs. Hearn began to cry hysterically. "How can you say that about Luna?
She's
our little princess. She's an adopted burden who is destroying this family." Mr. Hearn spat back, his eyes bloodshot. "We're liquidating the bag. Wire the $30,000 back to Magdalena today, and then you and I are going to Adderport to apologize." Spring arrived in Adderport, bringing crisp sunlight and blooming mountain flowers. The annual National Collegiate Science and Innovation Summit was hosted that year at Adderport University's Grand Convention Hall. Top universities from all over the country sent student delegations to present their research projects. As the host institution, Adderport University was the center of attention. Magdalena stood near the front of the main exhibition hall, wearing a tailored, charcoal gray suit, overseeing the installation of her team's poster and interactive demonstration module. She was the youngest team leader at the summit, yet her composure and sharp, authoritative command earned her the complete respect of her upperclassmen team members. Magdalena, the delegation from Southshire University, just checked in at the front desk. Julian whispered, coming up beside her with a cup of iced tea. "I heard their team barely scraped through the preliminary round." Magdalena didn't even raise her eyes from her tablet. "It doesn't matter. Focus on our calibration setup." A few minutes later, a commotion arose near the entrance of the exhibition hall. A group of Southshire students walked in, led by a tired-looking faculty advisor. Among them were Brannon and Luna. Brannon looked gaunt, dark circles heavy under his eyes. Over the past few months, his life had completely unraveled. To pay off the legal debt and avoid formal charges, his family had been forced to sell his car and pull back his living allowance. Luna, furious that her handbag had been sold, had thrown relentless tantrums until Brannon, utterly exhausted, finally broke up with her. Deprived of Maglina's academic tutoring, Brannon's grades at Southshire had plummeted, leaving him at the bottom of his class. He had only been allowed to attend the summit as an unpaid logistics assistant for the department. As for Luna, she looked equally disheveled. The lavish allowance her parents used to give her had been cut by 70% to cover the family's mounting business debts. Without designer clothes and expensive makeup, she looked remarkably ordinary, her White Lotus persona no longer working on classmates who knew about her legal scandal. "Look, isn't that Maglina?" A Southshire student pointed toward the center stage. Brannon looked up and stopped breathing. Under the bright spotlights of the central stage, Maglina was surrounded by prominent scientists, corporate investors, and university deans. She was speaking in fluent, elegant English, presenting her team's microclimate synthesis technology with effortless grace. Her skin was luminous, her posture regal, her eyes flashing with intellect and supreme confidence. She was no longer the girl sitting silently in the corner of a hotel room in Escal, waiting for someone to give her a crumb of affection. She was a sun, shining with her own radiant light. "Maglina," Brannon murmured, taking an involuntary step forward. Suddenly, two familiar figures rushed past him from the crowd, Mr. and Mrs. Hearn. Having tracked down Maglina's schedule through public summit announcements, Mr. and Mrs. Hearn had bought last-minute tickets to Adderport. Seeing their daughter standing on the prestigious stage, surrounded by applause and cameras, Mrs. Hearn's eyes welled up with genuine, overwhelming regret and
Greed.
"Maglina, my daughter," Mrs. Hearn cried out, pushing through the barrier rope and rushing toward the stage. The sudden intrusion caused the applause to die down. Security guards immediately moved forward, but Maglina raised a hand, politely motioning for them to pause. Mr. and Mrs. Hearn reached the bottom of the stage, looking up at Maglina with eager, tearful faces. "Maglina, darling," Mrs. Hearn sobbed, reaching up her hands. "We came all the way from home to see you. Look how well you're doing. Mom is so proud of you." Mr. Hearn tried to force a warm, paternal smile, though his face was twitched with tension. "Maglina, son, your mother and I missed you so much. We were foolish back then. We let Brannon and Luna confuse us. We know how much you sacrifice for this family. Come home with us after the summit, okay? Dad bought you a new laptop, and we can celebrate your achievements properly." The crowd of delegates, professors, and journalists looked on, murmuring in confusion. Brannon stood in the crowd, his heart hammering in his chest, watching the scene unfold. Luna sneered from behind him, though her hands were clenched tightly into fists green with envy. Maglina stood at the edge of the stage, looking down at the middle-aged couple who had given her life, yet had stripped her of every ounce of warmth, and dignity throughout her youth. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She simply looked at them with a polite, professional smile that felt 1,000 miles away. "Mr. and Mrs. Hearn," Maglina's voice echoed through the crisp microphone, clear and calm. "Welcome to Adderport University." Mrs. Hearn's smile froze. "And Maglina, why are you calling us Mr. and Mrs. Hearn? I'm your mother." "A mother?" Maglina tilted her head slightly. "A mother who gave $30,000 of living expenses to an adopted daughter while leaving her biological daughter $3,000. A collective gasp echoed through the convention hall. The reporters immediately raised their cameras, sensing a massive story. "A mother who stood by while my private diary was broadcast to humiliate me at a public banquet." Maglina continued, her voice steady, devoid of anger, stating cold, objective facts. "A father who let my hard-earned savings be stolen to buy a luxury handbag for someone else and told me I was carefree and thoughtless. When I nearly missed my university registration because I was forced to line up in the freezing cold for 8 hours." Mr. Hearn's face turned bright red, then ghostly white. "Maglina, stop talking. This is a public venue." "You came into my public venue," Maglina replied smoothly. "You asked why I didn't come home. I am simply answering your question." She stepped back from the microphone, looking down at them one last time. 2 months ago, I formally severed all financial and personal ties with your household through my legal representative. The tuition money was repaid to me via court settlement. I owe you nothing and you owe me nothing." "Maglina," Mrs. Hearn wailed, dropping to her knees on the polished floor. "You can't be so heartless. We raised you. You raised a servant, Magdalena said softly, her voice carrying only to the two of them. And the servant resigned. She turned her back on them and walked toward Professor Vance and the panel of summit judges, leaving Mr. and Mrs. Hearn kneeling on the floor under the glaring flashbulbs of dozens of media cameras. The summit ended in a landslide victory for Adderport University. Magdalena's team took the national first prize, securing a $2 million research grant for their department and a direct admission pass to a top-tier international PhD program upon her graduation. That evening, a grand celebratory banquet was held in the university hall. Outside the hall, near the fountain, Brannon waited in the cold shadow. He had been waiting for 4 hours. When Magdalena walked out, flanked by Julian and several laughing teammates, Brannon stepped into the light. "Magdalena," he called out, his voice hoarse, trembling violently. Julian made a movement to block him, but Magdalena gently touched Julian's arm. "It's fine. Give me a moment." Her teammates walked ahead toward the waiting campus bus. Magdalena stopped under the streetlight, her woolen coat neatly wrapped around her. "Brannon, I thought you would have returned to Southshire by now." Brannon looked at her, his eyes wild with grief, tears streaming down his face. Uninhibited. "Magdalena, please," he choked out, dropping to his knees on the stone pavement, right in front of her. "I know I was a scumbag. I know I didn't appreciate you. I was blinded by Luna's act. I was arrogant. I was stupid.
But these past
month, I haven't slept a single night without dreaming of you." He reached out, trying to grab the hem of her coat, but stopped himself, sobbing hysterically. "I remember how you used to cook for me when I was sick, how you stayed up late to organize my study notes, how you smiled when I gave you a simple paper crane when we were 15. Magdalena, I miss you so much it hurts. Please,
give me one more chance."
"I'll break off all contact with Luna. I'll transfer. Here, I'll do anything you want." Magdalena looked down at the young man kneeling in the dust before her. Once, his smile had been her entire world. Once, a single gentle word from him could make her forget an entire day of unfair treatment at home. She looked into her heart, searching for the old pain, the old yearning, or even a spark of lingering anger. She found nothing. The lake inside her was completely still. "Brannon," she said softly. He looked up with a glimmer of desperate hope in his bloodshot eyes. "Do you know why I used to cook for you, organize your notes, and cherish that paper crane?" she asked. Brannon shook his head rapidly, tears dripping from his chin. "Because back then, I lived in a dark, cold house where no one loved me," Magdalena said calmly. "I was so starved for affection that when you tossed me a tiny scrap of attention, I mistook it for the sun." She stepped closer, looking into his eyes. "But then I left that house. I came to the north. I saw real mountains, real oceans, and true light. I met professors who respect my mind, friends who value my presence, and a world where my worth is determined by my own intelligence, not by how obedient I am." She gave a gentle, finalizing sigh. "Brannon, you weren't my light. You were just the smallest candle in a dark room. Now that I'm standing under the sun, why would I ever look back at a broken candle?" Brannon froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. "Goodbye, Brannon," Magdalena said. She turned around and walked toward the waiting bus, without a single pause in her step. Behind her, Brannon collapsed onto the cold pavement, clutching his chest, weeping like a child who had lost everything because he truly had. 3 years later, the northern city of Adderport was covered in a pristine, dazzling layer of white snow. Inside the grand auditorium of Adderport University, the commencement ceremony for the class of 2030 was taking place. Magdalena stood at the podium as the valedictorian and student commencement
speaker.
She wore a black graduation gown with golden academic sashes, representing highest honors, her hair styled in soft, elegant waves. 4 years ago, Magdalena spoke into the microphone, her clear, resonant voice carrying across the thousands of students, faculty, and parents in the auditorium. "I arrived in this city with a single 12-inch suitcase, an $80 dress, and a heart full of uncertainty.
But I learned that the
choices we make when we step away from toxic expectations are not sacrifices, they're acts of profound self-salvation." The auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. In the back row of the public gallery, 3 people sat quietly in dark, worn
coats.
It was Mr. Hearn, Mrs. Hearn, and Luna. Over the past 3 years, the Hearn family had lost almost everything. Mr. Hearn's company had gone bankrupt due to poor management and loss of credibility. forcing them to sell their luxury villa and move into a cramped, noisy two-bedroom apartment. Luna had dropped out of Southshire University after failing multiple core classes and being abandoned by her wealthy social circle. She now worked as an underpaid desk clerk at a local gym, her White Lotus charm useless against the harsh reality of earning a living. Her relationship with her adoptive parents had turned bitter and toxic, filled with daily arguments over money and chores. As for Brannon, he had barely managed to graduate from Southshire with a failing GPA. Unable to find a decent job, he worked night shifts at a logistics hub, his spirit completely broken, spending his nights drinking alone in a dingy rental room, staring at old high school photos. Hearing that Magdalena was graduating as the top student in the university's history, the Hearns had saved up money for months to buy train tickets to Adderport, secretly hoping to catch a glimpse of her, perhaps to ask for help, or simply to see the daughter they had thrown away. Looking up at the magnificent girl on stage, a girl who was about to depart for a fully funded PhD program at Cambridge University, Mrs. Hearn silently wept into her worn handkerchief. She remembered the day in Escal when she had grumbled into the phone. She's so carefree and thoughtless. Couldn't she be more sensible like Luna? How blind she had been. How utterly, devastatingly blind. They had thrown away a priceless diamond and spent all their lives treasuring a piece of worthless gravel. When the ceremony ended, the graduates poured out onto the snow-covered central plaza, throwing their mortarboards into the bright blue sky. Magdalena stood surrounded by her friends, Professor Vance and Julian, who was now her research partner and close companion. They held a bouquet of fresh winter roses, laughing together as the camera flashes flickered around them. Across the snow-covered plaza, Mr. and Mrs. Hearn stood near the edge of the trees, watching her from afar. They didn't dare step forward. They knew that if they stepped into her world now, security would simply escort them away, and Magdalena's eyes would hold only that terrifying, absolute indifference. Magdalena caught sight of the three figures standing at the tree line. She didn't frown. She didn't turn away, awkwardly. She simply raised her champagne glass slightly in their direction, a final, polite nod to the past that no longer had any power over her. Then, she turned back to her friends, took Julian's hand, and walked forward into the bright, boundless winter sunshine. The snow was cold, but her path ahead was completely, beautifully warm.